Hi, Michael, and thank you for that. So, with all the Zoom that everybody's had in the last year and a half, I get a lot of questions about the accoutrements behind me, especially the big dictionary you see back there. That's essentially the internet from 1939. It's an unabridged dictionary from that year. And as our topic today is networking television stations, I thought I'd look up the definition of network. And here you can see it. Anything formed in the manner of a net, the fabric of threads, twine, or cords united at certain distances, forming meshes, and is in a network of blood vessels or a network of telephone wires. Now, if you look up network today, you'll find a lot more definitions, including adjectives, adverbs, and verbs. So, networking, I think, is a little bit more broad and pervasive than it was 82 years ago. But I'm here today to ask Mark Aitken some questions about the view that we need to, in the next few years, network television stations together so that we can take the maximum advantage of ATSC 3.0. So, Mark, I want to ask you, because I get this question. In the last decade or so, a lot of stations have become heavily interconnected to the point that many, if not most of them, are actually operated by remote master control and through regional hubs. And this has taken a lot of investment and a good bit of time. So, what more do you mean by networking stations beyond what we've already done?
Well, hey, listening to your definition, sometimes it feels like twine and baling wire. But no, the reality is, yeah, we've been operating as a centralized mesh network kind of framework for close to a decade, perhaps more actually. When I think about the emailing effectively of news items and shows were happening even close to 15 years ago. But as we move into ATSC 3 and we begin, we're well along in phase 1. We've got phase 2 coming around the corner. Phase 1 was about lighting up stations, but now we've got inquiries looking to how do I do business with broadcasters? I've got bits to distribute. How do I enable that? Well, you need to have that interwoven network across all stations, not just the stations that an independent single operator have, but if you're going to sell on a national basis and distribute bits on a national basis, then there needs to be an entryway into every piece of spectrum that covers the United States to be able to do that. And part of that activity is underway in ATSC with the development of a core network, and the other piece is going on in various private development efforts for orchestration of that network so that it can work in concert with the core. So those activities are extremely important when as we enter this next phase of data distribution as a business or broadcast as a service, or however you want to look at the opportunities that have been opened by the IP nature of ATSC 3.
Let me ask, because you focused first on data businesses, which I definitely want to get into. But are there any advantages of networking stations together and building a network core for the existing over-the-air television broadcast business? Are there advantages in the core business today?
Oh, absolutely. Look at as we move forward, you've got the development of various network strategies in sort of the framework of programming. If you think, for example, the way that the news industry is growing, you look at Sinclair or look at any other large group, the notion of 24/7 service that offers both entertainment, news, and weather and traffic, sports, and other things. The notion of having a subscriber and the notion of having service following really demands an interconnect between markets. Baltimore, Washington is an easy one. We've got stations in both markets, but in that in-between space, there's going to need to be a service handoff from one RF channel to the next RF channel. And secondly, as we enter phase 2 and phase 3 of this ATSC rollout, and we start doing single frequency networks and begin the densification of those networks, not only to ensure mobility, but to provide the opportunities to do directed programming based on smaller and smaller geographic areas. All of that is wholly dependent on having a network environment that allows the pushing of programming bits. Look at everything is bits. That's the point. As we design this for our current business of television, television is bits. We move almost transparently into the data broadcasting business, as the FCC has called it, broadcast internet, because in fact all those bits are IP bits and they can flow over any IP network.
Yeah, so I like that, Mark. I like your response to that. One way that when I get this question, I like to draw a contrast. In the broadcasting business, one of the first things we want to do is make sure that everybody using our signal knows that it's us, right? Branding is front and center. And we go to great lengths to put the branding out there and let the viewer know that it's a certain television station. The contrast I like to draw is in the data distribution business, and there can be some exceptions, but for the most part, in the data distribution business, the last thing you want is for the user or customer to have any idea where it's coming from. It just needs to work, right? Because we're not really trying to be in a branded business with data. We're trying to do an effective job of moving data to the user. And that requires an agile network that allows the receiver, the ultimate user, to switch from channel to channel as you move around from market to market, and even within a market where you have shadowing or you need additional coverage or the overlap isn't perfect. You want the receiver to be able to find the same service as it moves around, because today, it's really a national market for services, and everything has to work the same thing everywhere if we really want this to be accepted in the market and to become a universally used service. What do you think about that?
Well, actually, one thing that you said really strikes a chord, and that's the fact that that this is really a convergence opportunity for broadcasters, because the bits flow across any IP platform. That means it doesn't matter if it's ATSC3 or if it's Wi-Fi or if it's LTE or 5G or a countless number of platform opportunities, and so the content. You're right. The consumer doesn't care. Consumers have, in many cases, when you think about smart TVs, have come to the point where they push a button on a remote, and in their mind they're thinking, well, I just switched channels, right? Well, I went to the internet. Well, the internet's a really wide channel, but the fact is that if we do our job right, consumers shouldn't care as long as they're getting the content that they want, and broadcasters shouldn't care if it's their content that is being consumed by viewers and others. So yeah, it's and by the way, it's not one against the other. It's not broadcast versus unicast. It's not us against them. There are very definable opportunities where broadcast fills a big hole in the internet of today, but it's not to the exclusion of all these other platforms. Ultimately, I think if we do the job right, the mesh nature of our network will ride on top of all of the other IP-based, internet service provisioning platforms.
Yeah, Mark, I completely agree. And I think there's so many aspects of the IP interoperability of our RF channels with other internet interconnection paths that they're not always immediately obvious. For example, we're not going to have coverage immediately everywhere across all highway corridors, even as we get built out across the biggest markets, as we're doing very, very quickly. But over time, we'll eventually have more coverage with SFNs between markets. But in the interim, right, it's certainly possible to imagine a scenario in which a consumer is using a service that we may be able to offer within our coverage areas much more efficiently, but they're not within our coverage area. They can receive that service over the mobile wireless network. And when our signal is available, if our network is intelligent, then immediately and seamlessly to the user, they can drop that data connection back to their wireless carrier and then rely on the essentially limitless free distribution that we have within our coverage areas. So I think there are many, many scenarios as we build out the network where we can create a lot of efficiency, in the interim before everything is entirely built out.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's not us versus them, one or the other. It's everything. I think of the simple example: what happens, in the drive between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and you're going through a series of long tunnels. As we get smart and as we build out this network, we will certainly be embracing the free flow on a timed basis across those other networks, so that the switch over and handoff to different platforms is happening in unison as well.
Well, let me ask you a couple of nuts and bolts questions, Mark. How much is all this going to cost? And will stations have to make the investments all at once, or will they do this over time? Or are there other parties that will come in and make some of these investments by seeing the upside in the businesses that we think we can grow out of this?
Well, I think it's all of those. I think, number one, we tend internally at Sinclair, One Media is sort of the innovation arm of Sinclair. We're always talking about, how soon can we shut off ATSC 1? And so you've got the imperative. Everybody understands the imperative of moving to a more relevant platform, a more capable platform. The exodus of viewers from linear television certainly ought to be a cue. So the reality is, you can quantify it. I mean, typical station just wants to do a simple conversion of 3.0, sort of a dumb conversion to get started. You can do that for well less than $250,000. There are some cases where between an encoder and an exciter that converts a transmitter with a built-in scheduler, you might be able to do it for $100,000. But at the end of the day, the cost is almost irrelevant in the sense that if we don't do this, where's our future business? And that's really what the fight and the focus ought to be on the part of broadcasters, is how do we get to that next place that makes us relevant, makes us competitive, and allows much larger market opportunities in terms of dollar flows than we have in broadcasting today. We can get a huge bump in revenue opportunities if we in fact work together and build out a broadcast-based data distribution infrastructure.
Well, Mark, I think that is a terrific way to wrap this up. We're almost out of time, and thank you for coming on.
Well, hey, look, at a lot of these questions I know you were teeing up to me, but everybody watching certainly should know that that the job of BitPath is putting together broadcasters for the purpose of unleashing that opportunity in the future. And I thank you and BitPath for that.
Of course, thank you back, and thank everybody for watching.
Okay, bye.